The movie begins with a gritty depiction of the lives of young British soldiers during World War I. The opening scene is set in the trenches, where the soldiers are preparing for an imminent attack. The atmosphere is tense and grim, with the sounds of distant explosions and the constant threat of enemy fire. The soldiers, some barely out of their teens, share conversations sitting in groups. As they were talking, Sergeant Telford Winter passed by them, greeting them. Then they started looking through naked pictures of women. Second Lieutenant Ellis informs Sergeant Telford that the attack has been postponed for a day or two, meaning they have to remain in their current position. Telford, frustrated, questions the fate of the rest of the battalion and their backup. Ellis explains that reinforcements are expected to arrive tonight and that they need to hold the line until then. Telford realizes that this means they will face another 2 nights before the attack. Later that night, Telford woke the soldiers up and they started to get ready to keep watch. Meanwhile, Ellis is sitting in his room alone. Outside, Telford instructed the soldiers to stay alert, avoid smoking, and keep watch. Billy, one of the soldiers, asked how far the enemy was, as he couldn't see anything. Telford estimated the distance at approximately 400 yards and emphasized the need to stay vigilant, mentioning that snipers had fired 9 times the previous night. He explained the depth of the trenches was a precaution against sniper fire, reminding them to shoot at any movement they saw through the peephole and to avoid doing anything foolish. Billy hears a sound and calls Daventry over. When Daventry asks what it is, Billy responds that he heard something, possibly German voices. Daventry dismisses his concerns, suggesting it's probably one of their soldiers. He points out that the bombardment has been going on for 5 days, with thousands of shells falling on the German trenches. Telford enters the house where Ellis is resting. Ellis asks if there is any news, to which Telford replies that it's all quiet and most of the men are asleep. Ellis offers Telford a drink to ward off the cold, but Telford declines, explaining that he is a teetotaler and has made a promise to abstain from alcohol. Ellis expresses admiration for Telford's discipline. Telford then decides to go to sleep and asks about Ellis's plans. Ellis mentions that he will make a round and then head to the reserve trench. Telford assures Ellis he will take care of it, and they exchange goodnight wishes before parting ways. Billy, unable to sleep, starts talking to Eddie, asking what time it is. Eddie replies it's too late to be awake and apologizes for being tired. Billy asks about a girl from the post office and if Eddie has talked to her. Eddie says he has, guessing she's 19 or 20. Billy wonders if she's married. Billy asks if Eddie worries about being killed. Eddie tells him to sleep and reassures him that although Billy is a minor with a waiver, it doesn't matter here. Eddie admits he doesn't want to lose Billy, not for the world. Billy thanks him for the reassurance. The next day, all the soldiers are on standby, ready to attack if there is a threat. Ellis and Telford come to check on them, and Telford tells them to take a break. The soldiers decide to look behind the trench, and Eddie decides to take a look. He sees peaceful green grass and describes the scene. Suddenly, a bullet is fired, and Eddie is shot. Billy, seeing this, runs towards Eddie but is stopped by the other soldiers as he screams for him. Eddie is taken away on a stretcher, and Telford starts yelling at the rest of the soldiers for their recklessness. The soldiers are gathered, discussing Eddie. George also has a head injury from where Billy bit him trying to get to Eddie. The soldiers joke about whether it was a tooth or an incisor that caused the injury. Tensions rise when Dell is blamed for bringing bad luck with his dirty pictures. Another soldier mocks him, suggesting he should go back to Sunday school. The group argues, some believing the pictures cursed them, while others dismiss it as nonsense. Dennis approaches Billy to offer condolences about Eddie, suggesting it might be better since Eddie might get sent home, far from the trenches. Billy insists Eddie isn't dead, and Dennis apologizes, mentioning Eddie had asked him to pass on a message if something happened. Dennis offers support if Billy ever needs someone to talk to, acknowledging Billy's frustration and saying he doesn't blame him for being upset. Dell suddenly came screaming at them because he lost one of his pictures. He starts confronting Horace, saying he is interested in the girl in the picture and he is the one who took it, but Horace denies it, telling them that he is engaged. Telford then interrupted the confrontation and told the soldiers to prepare for recording a video. They all gathered, and Colonel Villiers began making a speech while standing next to them. After the speech, the soldiers waved a flag and cheered. The soldiers are gathered and talking when Horace attempts to apologize to George for not informing him about his engagement. He explains that it happened very suddenly, expresses that he wishes Horace had told him since it involves his best friend, leaving George feeling left out and emotional. Billy is confiding in Daventry, struggling to articulate his feelings. He wonders if it's possible for someone to feel something special in just a few sentences. Daventry, confused, tells Billy to be clear. Billy admits he hasn't met anyone special before, but thinks there's something unique between him and a girl. Billy starts to talk about the girl, but before he can finish the story, an explosion interrupts, and they rush to investigate. Billy rushes to the scene scene and is horrified by the sight. Bodies are scattered, blown apart by the explosion, and the remnants of a house lay in ruins. The devastation and chaos of the moment leave him shaken and terrified, and he runs away. As Billy runs from the scene, he meets Telford and Ellis but passes out before telling them what he saw. Later, Ellis and Telford discuss Billy's condition, concluding he'll be fine and that it was just shock. They talk about luck, with Telford explaining that anyone could have been affected by the explosion. Ellis finds this perspective harsh and reflects on how they both ended up there unexpectedly. The conversation shifts to a mission. Ellis explains the captain wants a patrol to investigate a nearby German trench. Telford asks about the patrol size, and Ellis says it can be as small or large as needed. They agree such decisions are critical before the attack. The soldiers sit in terror, shaken by the recent slaughter. Billy reflects on the devastation, noting that Rag and Charlie are gone without a trace. Horace, anxious, asks about Hoggy, mentioning he was last seen on the side. The mood is grim as Daventry makes a comment about Horace's impending marriage, which Horace finds neither funny nor clever. Telford informs Billy that his brother is in a hospital in Etaples. Although his brother will have some speech difficulties for the rest of his life, he is otherwise okay and will soon be back home. Billy thanks Telford for the good news. The soldiers began preparing for the attack. Telford gave instructions to everyone, and they agreed on a password for re-entry. The soldiers on watch finally locate a German soldier and quickly act to capture him. Telford instructs them to hold a gun on the soldier to investigate. Horace discusses how the explosions had deafened them, making it impossible to hear anything else. They speculate that the German soldier might have been part of a trench unit and recount hearing distant singing from the Germans in their shelters. Despite the chaos, the enemy seemed to maintain their morale. Suddenly, Daventry starts attacking the captured German soldier. The other soldiers quickly intervene, pulling him away and trying to calm him down. Daventry, still agitated, demands the soldier's name. The soldier responds, Dieter Zimmerman. Daventry introduces himself as Colin, while Horace sarcastically makes comments. Daventry makes remarks about making friends with the enemy, calling it a terrible crime. Horace then bitterly notes that Zimmerman is just a fellow soldier caught in the same situation, and they too are just a bunch of idiots trying to survive. He then storms out of there. Telford sees Billy walking away and asks what he's doing. Billy responds that he was going to the latrine. Telford advises him to try to get some sleep. Billy admits he can't stop thinking, and Telford sympathizes, offering him some jam that his wife made from strawberries in their garden, calling it delicious. Billy declines, saying he's too tired. Telford insists, praising the jam and encouraging Billy to have some, but Billy, clearly exhausted, declines again. Telford finally relents, telling Billy to go. Billy sees Dill going through Eddie's things and runs over to push him away. A fight breaks out, but Daventry intervenes, pulling Billy away and trying to stop the altercation. Daventry manages to separate them and takes Billy aside, calming him down. On the first day of the war, Telford is seen writing a letter. After finishing, he goes to check up on the soldiers, ensuring they are ready and addressing any concerns they might have. Ellis informs Telford that the orders have changed. He explains that something went wrong. 2 companies were lost overnight due to a communication error in the trenches, resulting in a significant lack of men. As a result, their squad will join the rest of the company in the first wave. Telford expresses concern about this group being ready, but Ellis insists there is nothing they can do as orders are orders. Ellis also mentions that the captain has given each platoon a soccer ball to boost morale. Suddenly, they hear a gunshot and see an injured soldier, causing immediate alarm and action among the troops. The soldiers hear planes passing overhead and start cheering, believing that backup has arrived. Meanwhile, Ellis is quietly drinking in his room, with the sounds of gunshots echoing in the background. As the soldiers are busy taking in the wounded, their trench is suddenly attacked. In the chaos, Dill, drunk, falls to the ground, adding to the sense of urgency and fear among the troops. Telford approaches Ellis and requests permission to use his whiskey for the soldiers. Ellis is initially shocked and firmly denies the request, stating that the men cannot go without rum. Telford argues that giving them a sip of whiskey would boost their courage and help them advance just a few more yards. Ellis remains adamant, repeatedly denying permission. Telford insists, suggesting that offering the whiskey with greetings from the lieutenant would motivate the soldiers to follow him anywhere, even to hell and back. Ellis, frustrated, remarks that at any other time, Telford would have been arrested and charged for such a request. Ellis finally agrees and gives the whiskey to the soldiers. They all start preparing to attack by putting a ladder over the trench and silently waiting. Dill gets sick, and Horace encourages him to get better and stand next to him. Telford approaches Billy, asks how he is doing, and reassures him that he will be right by his side. inside. Billy takes out a picture of his girlfriend, and Telford inquires about her. Suddenly, the gunfire stops. Billy, worried, asks Telford what they should do next. Telford tells him to wait. Billy expresses his concern about what might happen to them. Telford reassures him, saying he believes Billy will be fine and that he's the type who survives. As they hear the sound of a whistle, they start climbing the ladders. Just as Telford is about to help Billy up, he gets shot and falls. Ellis screams at Billy to get up, and Billy climbs the ladder, facing the war. Many soldiers, including Ellis, get shot, but the remaining ones keep moving forward. The movie concludes with Billy being shot and falling. On July 1st, 1916, the first day of the Battle of the Somme, 60,000 soldiers were killed or wounded, especially during the first 2 hours after the attack. It remains one of the bloodiest days in the history of the British Army.